We're live. Brilliant. And I'm still here. You can all hear me.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, guys, welcome. Welcome to everyone who's coming into the room. Good to see you all. And welcome to Brian and Connor, Brian Long, Connor O'Donnell from Times. Thanks so much for joining us.
Very
No
welcome.
worries at all.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be so faceless. I was just, while we were in the green room there, guys, just to explain, my camera was causing me a little bit of difficulty for some reason. So anyway, look, we're here and we're all good to go. So a teeny bit of housekeeping before we get going. Obviously, this is a 1 hour kind of tech focused session. We're delighted to have you guys here to join us. And we have obviously a slide deck that we're going to go through. So Q&A, as always, it's in the chat function, so please feel free to use it and get to know one another. We've allocated an hour for us all. We never go over it. That's something to bear in mind. For anyone who does need to duck out early, don't panic. It's being recorded and it will be in the Careers Hub in the next couple of days. But for those of you who are here for the hour, just make sure that you use it well. These guys have loads of information to share with us, and we're very lucky to have them. So will I allow you to introduce yourselves, guys?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah. So I'm Brian. I'm the head of engineering at Times. And this is Connor.
Yeah, I'm Connor. I'm senior engineer at Times.
Yeah, we'll fill you in a little bit more on our background as we go along as well.
And we may have another face. Noelle may join us as well. So if Noelle arrives, just for everyone here to know, Noelle is the lead recruiter, looks after the recruitment function, and is someone that you probably encounter along the way if you do go through an application or recruitment process. But look, what we have here, we have a brilliant presentation. So I know I've had a sneak kind of preview of it. You're going to tell us a lot about Times' story and kind of background, a bit about the tech stack and your product so that everyone kind of gets it. And then you have some brilliant, very valuable information around recruitment in general, but obviously specifically around some roles that you're hiring on. So look, I'm going to start this presentation just for both of you to know. You all have, sorry, one sec. You all have access to go to the next page, so feel free to either shout or jump into the little bottom icon there, and it will bring you through. But we will start it there. Okay.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. So yeah, I thought a great place to start might be at the very beginning. Tell you a little bit about where this whole crazy idea came from. So it all started a number of years ago when Owen, our CEO and co-founder, was managing a few security engineering teams at DocuSign. So security engineers are a special breed. They're quite technical, very, very smart, very hard to hire, very expensive, but they're not software engineers. And Owen was noticing that they were spending a lot of their time these very manual, repetitive tasks. So one example of this, just to put a bit of color on it, it's quite common in large organizations for there to be this kind of a shared email inbox, and the staff of the company are asked, hey, if you get any suspicious looking emails, please forward it to this address and our security engineers will take a look and make sure that nothing bad has happened because you received that email or interacted with it in any way. At the other end of that, then you have this team of security engineers who literally take each and every email and they'll pour through the attachments and the links in that email. They'll check the content. They'll make sure that the person who received the email didn't, actually reply and get fooled by the phishing scam. And if any of those bad things did happen, they'll make sure that any accounts that attach to that person get kind of shut down until they satisfy themselves that their network hasn't been compromised in any way. But yeah, this process was incredibly manually intensive. So what I wanted to do was to find a way to allow these security engineers to automate part of their tasks. And we went looking for a product to do it. Couldn't quite find anything out there that fit. So in a way of all good entrepreneurs, he was like, hey, let's go and see if we can figure this out and come up with a solution ourselves. He forked in an open source bit of software to start off with and got something working for his team in DocuSign before realizing, hey, do you know what? This is not a problem that's specific to us in any way, shape, or form. This is something that every reasonable sized security team in any organization has, where these really expensive, really hard to hire people are spending so much of their time on very repetitive tasks. So yeah, he left to start Times. He left to go build an automation platform for security and IT teams that was both powerful enough that it could actually meet these sort of complex requirements for these fairly technical roles, while being accessible enough that somebody who's not a software engineer can go ahead and build out these kind of automation workflows without needing to get somebody to write some code for them. And then, of course, because he was trying to sell to security people, he needed it to be a trusted platform as well. Security team is about the hardest team to sell it to when it comes to like making sure your software is safe and secure. So that's kind of how we got started. But I suppose the best way to kind of really explain what the hell it is we're talking about here would be to actually go ahead and show you the product a little bit. So maybe Connie, you might.
Did you want to share your screen? Because it's you found it.
Yeah,
of course,
there you go.
Yeah.
So this is an example of a tie-in story. A story in tie-ins is kind of like a program in programming. It has a job to do, and it's made out of smaller bits of logic and smaller commands. As Brian mentioned there, one of our kind of really common use cases is companies running a phishing inbox or security teams running a phishing inbox. So the way that typically works, is that there's an email address in the company like phishing@tines.com, and anyone who gets a suspicious email forwards it to this email inbox, and then the security team can go and analyze it. So there's 7 types of action in Tines, and each action is kind of like a command or like a function call in programming a little bit. So the first one here, where we start the story, is an IMAP action. So IMAP is a protocol for reading and sending emails from email inboxes. So whenever this runs, this gets an email. So whenever an email is sent to the inbox, this will receive it. The email then is passed on to a trigger action. This is kind of like an if statement in Tines. So here, the Tines user can fill in all the rules they want to use to figure out if this is a phishing email or not, or if there's a known kind of email that they know is good, they can check it here, and we'll only proceed if it matches those kind of given rules. Then we have an event transformation action. So this is, we do lots of different kind of transformations here. This one, for example, is deduplicate. So if someone sends the same email to the inbox many times, this will make sure that any duplicates, any emails after the first one will get ignored. Then from then on, we split into 3 other trigger actions based on what type of employee sent it in. So we can say if it's a security tester sent in the email, they're probably doing some testing. We can just ignore that. So there's no links further on into later actions from that. If it's an engineer, then we can use an email action to reply to that engineer and say, that was a phishing email. Thanks for reporting it. And we could also trigger on whatever workflow the company has from here using a HTTP request agent. And that's going to go off to a different service and send it a message to do some further tasks, maybe further analysis, or report it to a different tool. And this is actually one of the really interesting parts of tie-ins. So a lot of other tools out there have kind of bespoke integrations for every single app. We don't. We just have a generic HTTP request agent action that can talk to then any service with an API. And then to help get started with those, we have thousands of templates for examples talking to those services. So it's interesting because it's really a security focused project at the minute, but I think it should be pretty clear, kind of with a bit of programming background, that it's really it's a general purpose kind of programming like platform, and we're really trying to bring that power and flexibility of programming, make it more accessible to people, so they don't have to learn all those skills necessarily for some of the jobs. That's it.
Wow. I have to say, you're really good at simplifying something that we all know is really, really, really complicated. It's really important though, right? Sometimes you could listen to these things and still not really understand what the product does and how you might use it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like as Brian said, I mean, the prior version of this for most companies is doing each and every one of those tasks by hand, which is a huge amount of effort and a huge amount of hours spent doing that.
Yeah, and a huge amount of time wasted.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that we have a bit of a grasp on what it is you guys do, let's take a look at, we break it down a little bit, because I think that's what you do next, isn't it, in the presentation?
Yeah. We can jump back into the presentation.
Okay, cool.
I'll just hit the start button. Yeah. So Owen obviously left DocuSign to build this piece of software and start selling it to the world. Started Tines in 2018 and was kind of shortly afterwards joined by Thomas Kinsella, who was a bit of a partner in crime with him across a few different roles he had in DocuSign and eBay and PayPal. They'd worked together for a number of years in a few different companies. So Thomas came on board as our second co-founder. They managed to bootstrap the company themselves for a year and a half, and really, really impressively grew it to 10 big, well-known paying customers.
Yeah.
And they were that far with just 2 co-founders, 1 employee, I think, by October 2019. And yeah, they were very, very successful. But they decided to take the big bet then. They could have kept going in that way, but they said, hey, let's push the accelerator on this one and really try and take this big, basically go big or go home. So they decided to take on VC funding at the end of 2019, start of 2020. And yeah, as of April 2021, where our last round of funding was $41 million raised, and the valuation is now $300 million. So yeah, huge success in the first few years.
In such a short time. That is unbelievable.
Really,
oh my God.
Impressive.
And look, the 10 enterprise customers, just for anyone who's here, companies can spend 20 years getting one enterprise customer. Like that's just something, I don't know if I've ever seen that before with two.
Yeah.
Wow. Gosh. Okay. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind then.
Yeah. Hugely fast. Right up to today. So we're now at 53 employees. 50 paying customers. Revenue tripled in 2020, and it's on course to triple again in 2021. So we should be hitting around $5 million in annual recurring revenue by the end of this year is the plan, and we're on track for that. There's this concept in startup land of triple, double. So it's just like the playbook for how you become one of these really successful startups is you need to triple your revenue for the first few years, and then you start you double your revenue after that, and we're nicely on track for that, which is really, really exciting. And already, as kind of hinted at, already 25% of our customers are starting to use Times outside of security, which is kind of huge for that. And that's kind of where we want to go. Sort of taking a lesson from all the way back in 1997 when Microsoft Excel was first released, we think in Times that there's an opportunity to bring sort of that power of what you can do with software slightly more to the masses in a way that Microsoft Excel did it for calculations and spreadsheets. We think we can do it a little bit for workflows and automating repetitive, annoying parts of people's jobs to free them up to do the more fun bits. And there's a few sample logos from our website there in the bottom corner, a couple of big names there, a few missing from that as well. I think GitLab and HubSpot and companies like that are signed on as customers today now too. So then that's Times, and then maybe we should talk a little bit about engineering at Times, who we are and what we do. Just a bit more of an introduction. So I'm Brian. I started my career as a software development engineer at Amazon, and that was back in 2007. At that point, it was Amazon, very much so. But I guess at some point, AWS became the bigger kind of thing for engineers within Amazon at one point or another. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I think I technically started working for AWS instead of Amazon, the retailer. I was there for 7 years and then moved on to a company that's at a very similar stage to where Times is now. So when I moved to Intercom, they were just post Series B and going through that sort of incredible growth phase. So that was like a super exciting thing to watch and experience. Started there as an engineer, spent some time as a manager, went back to being an engineer and became a principal engineer with some responsibility across a few different teams, leading sort of the technical direction for a group. After that, I had a couple of years at a company called Wayflyer as a CTO there, as that was kind of getting up and running. And then, in the start of 2020, I started talking to Owen, and much as you were saying there, is like that success that he had early on, and the number of enterprise customers he had randomly won without the benefit of really much funding at that point, it was clear that there was something kind of special going on. So I jumped at the opportunity to build the engineering team at Times.
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, and from my side, I graduated college in 2013, I think, and worked at a couple of startups after that. Joined Intercom then in 2015, working on their mobile integration. Worked there for a couple of years, then joined the mobile team at HubSpot as a senior engineer. Then after a while of that, I moved to Wayflyer to work on some stuff outside of mobile and joined there as a senior engineer. And as Brian said, around the same time as he did, heard all the exciting stuff about Times and made the same leap to join the team.
So you were well acquainted.
Yeah.
We were reunited again. Yeah.
Yeah, working together a few years. can't get away from him. Our team then, very much a pandemic era engineering team. So the 12th of March here in Ireland, we got that sort of everyone should now work from home where possible announcement. it was the 23rd of March when I started, and a week later when Connor started. So from the get-go, we were working remotely and trying to figure out how we make that successful. And then over the course of the rest of 2020 and started 2021, and we built out sort of our team to where we are today of 7 people, and you can see some of the different places that we've all kind of worked at before. So it's a nice group of people with sort of really, really great experience behind them as well. And then so what we're talking to you today, we're hiring. So we're doubling in size this year. It's the plan, and probably next again. Hiring across all experience levels. As you sort of, I guess, as we've hinted at a couple of times, while our kind of go-to-market thing is very much about selling a security product, under the hood, the core of our product is not about security at all. It's about automating things. So you don't really need to know much about security. In fact, it's kind of a fun product for software engineers to work on in general, because I think we all secretly harbor a desire to write our own programming language, and at times I think very much allows us to scratch that itch. One thing I'd kind of call out as a thing we do look for, or we do really value, is I guess what we're trying to call, I suppose, a little bit full stack curiosity. So when we hire people, we want them to not necessarily be fully versed and really, really up to date with all of the technologies, front end and back end. But we want them to be curious about them. So if somebody's expertise lies in the front end in particular or in the back end, that's absolutely fantastic. And that's great to see. But what we want is people who are then curious about the bits that they don't know about. Because what we've found is if you're very knowledgeable about just one area of the stack and you're very narrowly focused on that one area of the stack, you can sometimes miss the easy answers to some problems. So if you're a strong back-end engineer, you might be tempted to fight against a very hard distributed systems problem to solve something that's really, really tricky, when there's a chance that a small change on the front end to just alter a user's flow a little bit can bypass that problem altogether. So what we want to see in the people we hire is that sort of like willingness to go explore all parts of the stack and follow a problem to where a solution should be best applied, rather than just sticking very narrowly in the area that they're most comfortable in, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you a question on that? A really quick one. Just in terms of measuring that, then, do you sort of, is that measured in interviews through conversation, or just through looking at the kind of tech solutions that people come up with? And
honestly, just through conversations. It is the sort of thing that is it's either something people feel like they want to do, or it's something that that doesn't interest them, and that's fair enough. This is very much a thing that we value, and it's not to say it's the only correct answer. Like, very, very deep expertise in particular technologies is also super valid in a bunch of situations, but for a small team like ours at the stage we're at, we need that sort of broader outlook. It's really up to the candidate, I suppose, to decide whether that's what they're looking for as well.
Sure. Okay. Thanks.
So I can talk a little bit about the tech stack. I'm sure there's some interest in this. So our backend is written in Ruby on Rails, which is a pretty standard kind of framework for building a lot of web apps like this. It's what Intercom, GitHub, Shopify, Zendesk, and a lot of others run on. On the front end, we use React to build the UI, and TypeScript, which is, if anyone hasn't come across it, is kind of an extended version of JavaScript, which has some more kind of type checking features, which allows us to kind of scale the front end code base more easily and avoid a whole kind of category of errors about getting types wrong when calling functions. When we package the app then to actually deploy it and run it, we package it up with Docker, which is a tool for bundling all our code and any other files and programs it needs into one image. And then we run that in the cloud on AWS, and we use a lot of their services to help run it as well. In terms of automation, then, we actually try to use tie-ins as much as possible. This is a bunch of advantages, which I'll talk about a bit later. But we try to be our own kind of biggest customer in tie-ins, which is getting harder with some of the customers we're getting in recently. But I think we're still one of the biggest we have. One thing I want to mention about this as well is that these are the tools and languages we use and the frameworks. We really don't see experience in these as a requirement for applying. We think there's a bunch of transferable knowledge if you've done work in in Python or Node instead of Rails, or if you've used Vue or Next.js instead of React. That's not really a problem. We're really looking for people who have the fundamental skills and can learn those things, as opposed to people who have specific backgrounds with these technologies.
Cool.
And yeah, a bit about our approach and some of the things we believe. So the first one there is, we really view technology as a means to an end. This has a bunch of knock-on effects and benefits for us. There are like loads of really interesting technologies out there, and I think everyone on the team has interest in those things, but there's a lot of them that wouldn't really provide any business value and wouldn't really make our lives easier to bring them in. It would be really, really cool to go off and spend 6 months making a VR version of Tines with AI-powered rendering and runs on the blockchain. These things would be really cool. It wouldn't actually really benefit us. It wouldn't really benefit our customers. And avoiding those and leaning on those those really tried and tested technologies that I mentioned allows us to keep our job quite simple and allows us to kind of power that full stack curiosity again, because we're not expecting people to work across a really wide, complex stack. We're really relying on a couple of really kind of common, well-tested tools, and those are the ones that we feel people are able to work in across the front end and back end. We're quite big on shipping our changes early and often instead of waiting for perfection. So there's definitely another world where we go off and cook and build our changes for months and months in advance before we put them in front of customers to try to give them the perfect first experience. But we believe that has a lot of negative effects. So what we do instead is we try to break up our changes into very small pieces, ship them very frequently to customers, monitor the results, and make sure that we're going in the right direction before taking it further, and get something working and helpful in front of customers, even if it's not perfect the first go around. We also rely a lot on tooling over process. So as I said earlier, we use Tines a ton. We try to avoid kind of any manual repetitive work at all. It's in the spirit of, I guess, what the company was founded for. And we do a lot of things like build. We have a couple of custom code checkers that run whenever we are making a change. Basically, anytime we're reviewing code and we see we're asking the same questions over and over again, we try to figure out, can we solve this with tooling? And this has been really good for us because even for a small team, we've been able to produce a bunch of good new features and improvements in the last year and a half. And a big thing powering that has been the fast feedback loops, being able to run tests frequently and very quickly locally, being able to get your IDE and our build tools to tell you where you're making mistakes without having to find out from disappointed or angry customers, which is always good. And the last thing there is, dogfitting. So as I mentioned, we're really, really big on using Tines. We use Tines for a lot of our deployment, security alerting, monitoring, even employee onboarding actually now. So for any new hires we have, I think their laptops are ordered by Tines at this stage nearly. So we're really big on that. And that has a bunch of good effects as well. It keeps us as kind of frequent users of the product. It also means that we're able to spot kind of opportunities for improvement before our customers do, and we have that extra motivation to fix them because we ourselves will benefit from it. And to talk you through a typical week on the team. So we don't have a huge amount of meetings, which combined with the remote work, I think is really good for keeping us very productive, and also good for the work-life balance too, I think, and the energy levels. So we have a daily 2 p.m. video call with the whole team. This is really just for kind of everyone to give updates on what they're working on, what they're planning to go on to next, any discussion around getting feedback on a change or an idea, asking for help if there's something blocking you or something you can't figure out, and even just tossing around ideas for the product. And with everyone remote, it's also a really good opportunity for general chit chats and a chin wag, which you don't really get as often when we aren't in the office. But it's a really good opportunity for everyone to get some FaceTime and just to chat about daily life together. Then every second Friday in the company, we do a town hall with the whole company, and the engineering team demos the latest features and changes of that. So this is a really good opportunity to get the work you've been doing in front of the entire company, which, as Brian mentioned, is big enough, but it's growing quite fast. It's really satisfying feeling to take your work in front of everyone and tell everyone the improvements you're making for customers, and it helps everyone else on the team see the good work that engineering is doing. Then every week we have a planning meeting and a retrospective. So we don't really do, I guess, compared to some other companies, we don't really do kind of longer sprints or planning of kind of individual tasks beyond the weekly cadence. So we do plan overall goals and big projects we'd like to do for each quarter and each half of the year. But on a week-to-week basis, we kind of plan the exact tasks and little bits of the projects that we're working on. That helps us to kind of as I said earlier, kind of ship early and often. We ship things in quite small chunks. And B, it allows us to change direction when we need to as well, and makes that planning a lot easier. You don't really run into that situation that I've been in countless times before at other companies of, saying you're going to have something ready in 2 months' time, and then all of a sudden it's a week before the deadline and you're not quite there. We don't really run into those situations because we keep the planning going quite frequently. And then we use Slack in our chat room, so there's tons of Slack chat in between with everyone being remote. So it's a nice balance between being able to focus and also having the chit chats when you need them.
It sounds like there's a lot of autonomy as well, a lot of trust between you all, and sort of project driven focus rather than meetings and the kind of the day to day. Quite mature.
Yeah, definitely. Even beyond that, we as we do our weekly planning, we often try to not fully subscribe our time. Make sure there's a little bit of slack in the week for people who spot an opportunity or something that's just niggling at them as a potential problem, to just go, follow that niggle and see what turns up from it.
Gosh, yeah, well worked out.
So what we thought could be kind of a fun, slightly different way of continuing this presentation from here, rather than just keep telling you more and more things about times, frame it a little bit differently. We kind of sat down and thought about what questions would we think to ask any potential employer with the benefit of our experience. And so we'll give you a taste of those questions that you should feel free to take to any of your conversations with future employers, and then obviously we'll tell you what the Times answer is, and we think they're pretty good answers, obviously.
Yeah, so I can take the first few. So what'll I work on my first day, my first week, my first month? There are a lot of companies out there that for a bunch of very valid reasons, when you join, will say great, welcome to the company. Within maybe 6 weeks, you'll be up and running and you can start to look at the code base and making some changes. And that's something we kind of try to avoid, because that feels like a bit of an unsatisfying start for people. And it kind of delays all the learning and really get into the job. But one thing we're really proud of is that with the recent engineers we've hired, everyone's got a local version of Times running on day one, usually even in the first few hours. So just after lunchtime on your first day, you'll have the whole local version of Times running. Feel free to try out any changes you want. It's all running on your laptop. And then what we've seen, and we don't really put any pressure on this, there's no kind of stress about it, but what we've seen typically is the engineers we've been hiring at all levels have been making customer impacting changes at the end of the first week. And I think a lot of that's down to, as we said before, we're really pretty heavy on good tooling and really good developer environments, and making sure that that everyone's set up to have their tools help them instead of getting in their way, and allow them to do their best work at the speed that they're able to do it. How do you QA your software? Yeah, so this is another approach that I guess a lot of companies do differently. We, like a bunch of other companies as well, we don't have a separate team for testing and QA. A lot of other companies, engineers would kind of produce a feature, produce a change, and then kind of manually check it, or maybe write a couple of unit tests, but then hand off to a QA team. And I've seen situations where it can be the best case days and the worst case weeks before feedback gets back to the engineers, and they say, "Oh, that thing you did a while back, it's actually not quite working right." And for that and for a few other reasons, we try to avoid that. We don't have specific test or QA roles. Engineers, whenever you're making a change, you own the testing and the QA of that, which helps in a bunch of ways. One, again, it's a really nice small feedback loop, which means that as you're actually developing the feature, you're feeling more confident that it's going to work because you're adding your own tests as you go. And also you can apply the context that you have from developing the feature to actually figure out what test cases need to be added, what are the edge cases, what are the ways in which this might break. And I think that context is really invaluable for testing. How do my changes get deployed? Again, for a bunch of valid reasons, other companies can take months or weeks between actually making releases. I know some companies that are pretty good companies, but they release once every 6 months. So when you get a customer talking to you and they're saying, "I'm really having trouble with this," and you make a fix for them, you could be waiting up to 6 months before that customer actually gets that fix. We after you make a change and it goes through automated testing and peer review and gets approved, then 10 minutes later it's in front of all of our customers. This is a bunch of benefits. It's really satisfying, as I mentioned. B, it's great for the customers because they get the changes really quickly. We've had cases actually where customers have, only once or twice, but we have had changes where customers have raised something on a call and they've refreshed their browser at the end of the call and it was fixed for them, which is really, really satisfying, but also has a bunch of other very real benefits. So as Brian mentioned, most of our customers are using us for pretty critical security workloads. And as you saw the list of customers earlier, they're quite big customers. So like safety is quite important to us. That's one of the reasons why we use so much automated testing. But also it's important that we can get changes not only into production quickly, but back out. So that 10 minutes goes both ways. When your change goes in, it can help everyone in 10 minutes. But if there's anything wrong with that, if the results aren't looking good, if it's affecting something else, 10 minutes later, or even less in most cases, it's back out. Which really allows us to move in small chunks and small iterations quite quickly and preserve that safety.
Do you mind if I ask you a quick question there then?
Yeah.
Because very often there's a really sort of large, significant support function in between you guys as the main engineers and your customers. So do you not have that? Or is it just an automated ticketing piece if your customers want to make a request?
I guess most of the time our customers are talking to our support teams through Slack or through video calls. In those cases where we've got those changes really quickly, it's been a case of 5-10 minutes into an hour-long meeting. Customer mentions it to support. While the customer drops in a quick message to us, we recognize the issue by looking at the metrics, figure out what the change is, get that deployed. We can say someone's on the call, so it'd be good to get this done soon, which gets someone to peer review it quite quick. Our automated testing pipeline takes about 5 minutes. To run, I think 5,000 tests, then 10 minutes later it's in. So those cases, by the end of the call through our regular channels, it was a bit lucky timing, but yeah, we got to change the customers.
You make it look. That's unreal. Wow, well done. Good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
One more one I wanted to mention, and this is this can be something that doesn't really cause a problem in a lot of companies, but just something I think is worth raising because it's something that I really appreciate and enjoy about working at Tynes. A lot of companies have really great roles on really interesting products that are very unrelated to how the company actually makes money. They're not really business critical kind of to the company. And what I've found before is this can cause a bit of tension sometimes where you're kind of trying to balance advocating for the users and building the right thing for them with building the thing that'll make the company money. And this comes up a lot with things like privacy and advertising and user data, where you could do, if you did everything the users wanted, everything that would benefit them, you actually could really hurt the company's income stream. At Tynes, I'm really happy that all of our income comes from the subscriptions to the product we build. So there's no tension there. Our income comes from customers being happy with the product. The more happy we make the customers, the more happy they are to subscribe to it, and the more customers we get. So it's a really nice lack of tension. It feels a lot more like a collaboration with the customers then, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Cool. There's one more for you, Connor.
Yeah. What does the hiring process look like? I want to mention a bit about this. So myself and Brian built out the hiring process in the last 18 months from scratch. We've had plenty of good and bad experiences in the industry, being interviewed in places. And we really wanted to avoid a lot of the mistakes that, or the bad experiences that we've had in the past. So two of these that we really wanted to avoid are around one general theme. Is that a lot of companies interview you in a way that feels a lot more like an IQ test or a general intelligence test than are you actually going to be effective doing this job, which I think is a real shame. A lot of companies still use like obscure computer science problems. Like how many piano tuners are there in the entire world? Can you figure that out? How many jelly babies can you get into a 747? Why are manhole covers round? Amazingly, we've never had to deal with manholes in our actual work here. So it's not really a relevant question. And another thing companies do sometimes is treat interviews a bit like a memory test. You'll go in and it'll be, you're at a desk and you can't look at anything. You can't look at your phone, and it's what's the maximum integer size in the 32-bit JVM, and these things that are just, they're not really reflective of how you would do work. So our approach is we want to make our interview process as much like our real work as possible. The first phase of our process is a take-home coding exercise. It involves building a very, very simple command line version of Tynes. So it is reflective of the actual code and product we've had to write in the real product. There's no kind of artificial deadlines around it. So we don't give you a 3-hour timer sitting at the corner of your screen. The same way we don't have a 7 or 8 hour timer at our screen when we're doing a typical workday. So we ask simply that when you get it, you get back to us within 2 weeks, either with a working solution or a note that you've had some stuff going on, and understandably, you might need a bit more time to do it. And it's not a memory test. We don't have, throughout the whole interview process, from the coding exercise to the later stages where we'll pair with candidates on extending that solution to the exercise and adding more features to it. We are happy for people to use Google during the interviews. We use Google every single day. I forget acronyms daily, so like Google is a very important part of our work process. So one thing that's really important to us is just making that feel like as much like a real work as possible. That gives us a better gauge on how candidates can actually do at the job, instead of just can they fulfill these arbitrary intelligence criteria. And it's a lot more fair in the candidates, and it's kind of satisfying, I think, too. So we're quite proud of that.
Reassuring to see. Yeah, nice for someone coming in to hear all that.
Yeah. The more realistic I think it is, the better for everyone involved, I suppose.
Indeed.
So a couple of nights to go through as well. Kicking off with I think a hot topic one at the minute. So what's our policy on remote work? So it seems like at the moment there's a little bit of a trend around for companies to start asking people to make their way back into offices. They feel that for whatever reason over the last 18 months that working remotely has hurt their ability to innovate, and the lack of collaboration is going to hurt there, and also in how they're able to train their sort of junior staff. That hasn't been our experience at all. So I was saying this was a team kind of born in the pandemic. So that's kind of some of the things that Connor outlined on the show. We've adapted how we work to fit remote work. So we're happy to continue working fully remotely. We have an office in Dublin, and people will be welcome to come in and use that office as much or as little as they like, or work fully remotely if that's what suits. Ideally, we'd occasionally get together as well every month or two as a team. It's so fun to have those moments in front of a whiteboard to really talk through a problem, but it's all optional and as suits people best. A great question to ask any potential employer is about out of hours on call. So historically, it's not so much a problem anymore. But historically, a lot of tech companies establishing in Dublin, especially where we are, they did so really initially to just give themselves cover for a team based somewhere on the west coast of the United States, so that they didn't have to get woken up in the middle of the night when a piece of software broke. And that's why they started an office in Dublin. In those sort of environments, then it can sometimes feel like that while your job title is, software engineer, and what you're ostensibly hired to do is to write software, in reality, that kind of feeling of I'm just really here to mind this pager while the people in San Francisco get a night's sleep. Sometimes that could have manifested as well a little bit as it's not totally in your control to kind of fix the root causes of those pages. So your phone's going off, and you're playing whack-a-mole a little bit with the problems, and you don't really have that power to sort of, hey, let's try and eliminate the source of this. The approach we're taking at times so far is that I'm the only one on call at the minute, because I want to make sure that I'm feeling the pain. I get to set what we do for a week, so I'm heavily motivated to make sure that when things go wrong, that we prioritize fixing them. We're going to continue like that for a while to make sure when we do ask the people on our team to take out of hours on call, that it's the understanding that it's very unlikely that they'll be paged, and if they are, they will be doing everything we can to make sure that that never happens again. So that's our approach. Great question as well, is what the diversity of the team is like. And some companies still won't see this as important, or will kind of shy away from answering the question. This is really, really important to us. It's something that we feel like we're a little bit behind on. We're not doing as well as we'd like to do, and it's something we're constantly looking at it, and really trying to improve. And performance management and reviews. Larger companies tend to have really well-structured, a little bit rigid processes, checklists of kind of attributes and behaviors that they're looking for their staff to demonstrate. Those sort of processes are beneficial in a bunch of ways, in that they make sure the structure is there, they make sure those kind of key conversations are happening, and that people are getting the benefit of feedback and are having their kind of performance managed in a positive way, to make sure that they're growing and they're improving, and they're getting better all the time. We're a small company. We haven't quite figured out all of those processes, but what we do at the minute is a little bit more fluid. We have sort of continuous feedback. So ongoing conversations weekly with your manager, you'll be getting that feedback, that chance to kind of grow and learn. Any kind of promotion we have is not a box ticking exercise. It's very much looking at the person and what they need to do to grow as an individual and to kind of get to that next level. So yeah, trade-offs there between, I guess, what the structure of a big company and I suppose the kind of adaptability of a small company. Always useful to check, especially in the tech industry, about the benefits outside of salary. Yeah, especially at smaller companies, you can actually come across in like companies at a very early stage where things like annual or parental leave are sort of at the bare minimum levels required by law, or it's unlikely that you'll have pension contribution matching, or maybe even unlikely you'll have health insurance. Always worth keeping an eye out for that in any package to make sure you understand the full value of what you're getting offered. A critical one to look at as well is if you're getting stock options in a company. It's a really complicated thing, and honestly, I could do a 40-minute presentation on understanding stock options, but I'll leave you one little tidbit to keep an eye out on, and that's restrictive exercise windows. So this is what kicks in if you leave a company and you have stock options in that company. Quite often you can have 30 to 90 days to exercise those stock options once that happens, or you lose them. And exercising stock options, not only do you have to pay some money to actually do the exercise, but in Ireland for sure anyway, then you're subject to a massive tax bill, basically taxed as income tax at that point. And you may be forking over a large amount of cash to buy some shares that are not actually liquid, so you don't have an opportunity to sell them. So it can be a really, really tricky situation, and it's definitely worth generally educating yourself on stock options and really keeping an eye out on that exercise window side of things. From Time's point of view on this one, we have an extended exercise window. So if somebody's been with us a couple of years and then they leave, they get to keep their stock options. They don't have to exercise them for a further 5 years, at which point, all going well, the idea would be that Times would be public or would have had some liquidity event. That means that those stock options that you buy won't be illiquid. You'd be able to sell them and fund whatever tax bill you need to pay. So that's the idea there. Yeah, just generally, equipment is always kind of good to keep an eye out on. Yeah, we'll give you the latest MacBook Pro, a 4K monitor, and 500 euros to make sure that you're comfortable and well set up for working from home if that's what you're choosing to do. Yeah, good equipment is obviously just it's a good sign that an employer is willing to actually make sure you have all the right tools to get your job done. We have health insurance paid for you. We also, I think, pay up to 50% of your dependents, and we have pension contribution matching up to 5%, which is pretty rare, I think, in a company at this stage. So we're pretty proud of that one. And then we also have pretty generous annual and parental leave as well.
Wow. Well worked out. Again, it's lovely how clear you are. Sometimes this is such a secretive part of working for somebody. And I know there's more to it, on an individual basis. But yeah, thanks for being so open.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, and I guess with that, then we'd be kind of curious to go through any questions that we couldn't think of to add into our presentation.
Well, I know one that everyone will be wondering about if they are applying. You mentioned that the kind of the technical way that you assess people's skill sets is obviously, in a way, it's malleable. You have time and a nice environment to do it in, but is it? I don't know how much you can tell people about this without sort of ruining the surprise if you get that far. But how do you manage that then if everyone's coding in different languages and you're not too restrictive about it?
Do you want to take that one, Connor?
Yeah. So, I mean, to be honest, the openness and kind of transparency about that part of the process is something that I think has benefited candidates, but also benefited us a lot. We put up a blog post recently about the coding exercise, and kind of basically talked about all the main points that we expect to see. And we also mentioned for some of those, like a little guide or kind of some links to get started in them, because we don't want to miss on great candidates just because someone hasn't come across a certain concept or tool in their career. In terms of actually evaluating the exercises, so as we tend to do, we have a time story, which actually will reply via email to candidates who are doing the exercise and tell them whether their solution is working or not. So you won't be at a stage where kind of you're sending it off thinking, I hope that's kind of working. The Time Story will send you an email and tell you if it's working or not. If it's not working, it'll tell you the result it should be sending. To go into a bit more detail, the way it works is youth coding exercise, you build a small version of Tines, then we give you a sample story for that to run, which will send a request to our coding exercise Tines instance with some data in it, which you'll have formatted correctly. If the program you wrote was correct, then that'll reply to you straight away. And if it wasn't formatted correctly, it'll show you what the right format is, so you can make your program match that. And if it is correct, it'll congratulate you and give you a link to where you can submit the coding exercise to us. And as I said, the blog post goes into quite a good bit of detail about what we do expect. So we tried to eliminate that aspect of, someone is really talented, but they just haven't come across a certain tool or a certain area of programming before, because I think a lot of companies end up missing really great engineers that way.
Yeah, and and it's something that it's hard when you're going into it blind to know exactly, unless you have a really fixed idea, obviously, of what you need somebody to do when they get there. But it sounds like you're still growing so much that there's a real acknowledgement of there being a huge amount of kind of space, I suppose, for people to slide into like a jigsaw. There's a nice question there from Paul, and I have another one here actually that came into me on my chat. But Paul, you can probably see it there, super presentation. So nice one, Paul. Thanks for that. Or thanks to Times. What's the number one thing about working for Times? What do you like the best about being there?
So I think maybe it's for me personally, it's the product that we're building. I find it really, really interesting. Like, how can we take what before has been restricted to people who have spent like years learning how to write software, and how can we kind of give that power to like a broader group of people? This is very satisfying. It's very satisfying to get people who haven't had that opportunity to kind of automate something and get that sort of thrill of building a thing and seeing it work for the first time. Giving that to more people is like, when you see new customers kind of hit that point, it's such a really satisfying thing to build.
Yeah, I totally agree with Brian's point there. And I would cheat and add probably two things that are kind of my favorite. One is the availability of working completely remotely. So I think I'm saving around about 7 or 8 hours a week commuting to our older office space actually in North Mines. But yeah, that's been really huge for me, and it's really helped the work-life balance and be able to continue that as we kind of move out of restrictions. And another thing is just kind of similar to what Brian said about the product, but more so kind of the environment of building the product. Like, I think it's really good to work in a place that it feels like the environment, the tools you have, the co-workers, the code base are all kind of speeding you up rather than slowing you down, and allowing you to kind of to make those changes that you have the interest in making really easily and really safely and quickly.
And I know I'm conscious of the time because I need to let you guys go in a couple of minutes, but there was one question that came into me before this webinar from someone who couldn't attend and asked me to ask you this. So the question was, when it comes to looking at applications, so if I was sending you my CV in the morning and I'm an early stage career developer, what do you look for in a CV? Or, what would be the kind of top 2 things for you guys to check out as engineers before you decide whether to bring somebody to meet you or not?
Like in a CV, it's kind of super hard to kind of differentiate yourself, I guess. Like a really interesting thing is maybe to get some sense of projects that you've put together in the absence of sort of directly kind of relevant kind of work experience. For those coming from different industries, though, it is always kind of interesting to see that sort of breadth of experience they have elsewhere as well. I mean, it's always something that I think can stand to people quite a lot, that they've learned some different skills and some things that they could bring to our team that we wouldn't necessarily have through experience they have elsewhere as well. So yeah, okay. I think some sense of the projects kind of you worked on in technology and any other experience you have is all good stuff.
Okay. Sound advice, and the nodding heads there. So it sounds like that's just like the impression that you get, the profile of the person represented, and then just obviously because of the nature of this, you need to be able to see some projects. So make sure that they're front and center and really easy to access.
Yeah.
I think one thing I'd add to that as well, just for people, especially at the early stages of their careers, is we've seen actually some candidates come in at the early stage of their career and basically try to kind of present themselves as what the experience they have is kind of, they know all they need to know, and like what I know already, it will be what I can bring to this company, and I don't think there's a need to do that. The much more effective approach, I think, at that stage of your career, is to go in and show what you've learned so far, and you're eager and capable of learning more. I don't think most places expect people at the early stage of their career to come in and be as good as they're going to be. And I think it's much more important to emphasize your interests and your abilities to learn over what you've necessarily done already.
Mm-hmm. Okay. God, lovely advice, guys. Thanks. There's something that really strikes me, like what you're doing is so sophisticated, but you're all very modest. And Noelle is also really modest about the achievements and the processes. Like, you all just sound like a really nice bunch of people. It's really easy to understand what you do, and you seem to be very clear. It's pretty impressive, particularly for such a young company, to be so unified on that. It's cool. So look, in terms of a call to action, we're coming up to the last few minutes. I've just put a link. Oh, well done. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a couple of Twitter accounts, Times_IO for the main kind of company account, updates on the product and so on. We also have a Twitter account for our engineering team where we mostly tweet links to our blog. Every 3 weeks or so, we post about something that we've been working on or thinking about. It gives a good sense of the team and how we think about things. So you should check that out. And as Connor said, there's some tips on there as well for offline coding exercises. And then to apply, it's times.com/careers.
Brilliant. And then you'll go forward then into the process, and it will take its due course. So look, best of luck to anyone who's going to be going ahead. I know there's open roles right now, so don't waste any time. And look, obviously, a really massive thank you to you both. Your time is really valuable. It's been really informative. And thanks definitely from everybody here and everybody who's going to be watching back on the recording. And we'll 100% be keeping in touch with you to follow up and see how everyone's getting on in their applications.
Cheers. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
And also, Noelle, if she's still here, a big thank you for facilitating this and getting it set up. So much appreciated.
Yeah. Cheers, Noelle.
Okay, enjoy your lunch, enjoy your day, and thank you very much.
Thanks. See ya.
Cheers.
See you. Bye.